let's get into this fine conversation we're about to have on happiness. We're going to take some turns. We're going to take some fun questions and some unusual processes on this. And first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Dave Hester. I am the VP of Guides here at LifeGuides. And my job really is one of the chief happiness officers here is to make sure that I'm creating an environment for our guides to be their happiest and most productive selves and helping others improve their well-being. And I want to introduce you to the two wonderful ladies who are accompanying me today. First, we'll start with Rakia Elstock. She is a business consultant, coach, and life guide. Rakia is an award-winning travel and hospitality leader and coach, as well as a business consultant in the compliance and regulatory control arenas. She is also a proud mother of two adults. Rakia's goal is to always help others discover their full potential and grow beyond what they feel like there are their own limitations. So thank you, Rakia, for being here. I appreciate you being available for this discussion. I want to next introduce second timer. So this is number 2 for you. All right. We have Peyton. She is a reflective empath, PhD candidate in psychology, woohoo, as well as a life guide. Peyton is a reflective empath whose mission is to highlight the humanness. Yeah, she's here to highlight the humanness in mental health and dispel the stigma outside of furthering her education towards PhD in psychology. Peyton enjoys her purposeful work as a life guide, along with the Yellow Tulip Project, a youth-driven nonprofit organization spreading suicide awareness, prevention, and hope. All right, so Vinny, if I chop up at all, the ladies will take it up, take it from here. But let's go ahead and get started. We're talking about happiness today, but I want to pass it over to you, Peyton, as you have a great way for us to step into this happiness.
Yeah, so one of the proven strategies for happiness is actually meditation. So I thought what would be appropriate for this chat is maybe to kick it off with a minute meditation. They do suggest like a 10-minute meditation practice, but I think that's a pretty big slice of pie to take out if you don't have any meditation practice established. So one of the things that Eckhart Tolle suggests in his most recent publishing, The Power of Now, is minute meditations. And you have these minutes kind of all throughout your day, whether you're waiting in the grocery line, if you're waiting for your internet to kick back in, and just taking that moment to be really present. And then, as time progresses, you can build on that minute and work up to that 10-minute threshold. So what I wanted to do is just take a minute now, and it's not as arduous as I think a lot of people think it to be. It really is just tuning into the present moment and touching into all 5 of your senses, or tuning into your breath. What we'll do today is just tune into our breath and the expansion of our stomach and the constriction of our belly button back to our spine. So if you'll join me wherever you find yourself seated, roll your shoulders back and have a nice strong spine for me. It also opens up your lung area here to allow for some big, deep breaths. And with your inhale, you're going to feel the expansion of your stomach. And I really want you to expand it as much as you can, almost if, pushing the boundaries of what your stomach will permit. And you want to feel it in your stomach rather than up here in your chest. And then when you're exhaling, you want to imagine your belly button being pulled back towards your spine. And what you want to do is try to have the exhale longer than the inhale, because we're pumping the brakes on that parasympathetic nervous system and allowing our bodies to get the message of we're safe, we're okay, and we're present. So with that, let's start with our inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Last one here. And longest exhale. Thank you all for joining me for that little minute, tuning into our breath. I hope that you enjoy, this conversation and can be present here with us.
Thank you so much for that, Peyton. I appreciate that. It's something that we forget sometimes, that breathing is needed. It's necessary. And regardless of your maybe religious background, breathing is something that you do. It's just kind of normal. So paying attention to it and focusing on it in whatever way is helpful. So let's dive right into this. You know, we're talking about happiness today, and for some people, happiness is fleeting. You know, it's tough for people to be happy with all the given challenges in the world. But I want to, start and just kind of get an idea of what it means to you. So I want to start with you, Rakia. You know, how did happiness happen for you, and kind of where is it going for you?
Well, Dr. Dave, I've been on my journey towards happiness or maintaining happiness in my life since about 2006. Happiness was contagious for me. That's where it began. I met a gentleman at a work event, and we were talking about our emotions. And we asked each other, as an icebreaker, what's the emotion that you find the hardest to control? And at that point in my life, it actually was anger. And so I confidently shared that with the gentleman. And he looked at me with like childlike wonder and he goes, "Well, mine's is happiness." And then he just chuckled. And from that moment, I thought to myself, wow, that's the emotion that I want to be the hardest for me to control. And so that's when I became more self-aware about myself and how I perceive the world and the situations and circumstances that surrounded my everyday and impacted my emotions to choose happiness intentionally as much as possible.
Nice ad. Quick question, Peyton. Is happiness a choice? Because I heard Ricky had mentioned choice, and that kind of prompted my thought process. How do you feel about the concept of happiness being a choice?
Great question. I do think that it is a choice to an extent. I think what I want to comment on with Rakia saying that anger was her emotion that she couldn't kind of control or keep a cap on. When we experience that it extrapolates to all of our emotions. So if you're not having a cap on anger, or if you're trying to suppress that anger, you're also suppressing all of those other emotions. What we can do in the matter of choice is switch up the narrative so that we can frame a situation to highlight the silver lining, to highlight the happiness, even in the midst of a rainstorm.
Outstanding. Anything to add there, Ricky?
Yes, I do have something to add. True to your point, Peyton, I just read a book from Canadian author Neil Pasricha, and it's called The Happiness Equation. And in that book, he shares a study that was conducted. And in this study, it points out how happiness, 10% of our happiness is derived from circumstances. That means what happens in our lives, what happens to us. And a lot of the times we can belabor and pine over life events that maybe didn't go our way, or goals that we didn't reach, or whatever the case may be. But in all actuality, according to this research, 90% of our happiness is um, coming from how we see the world. So what you spoke about as far as being able to frame what we're seeing and how we can see any given situation is very, very true. And if we take intentional actions towards maybe sort of shifting our view in some situations, not every situations, because we do have to feel our emotions. There's a time and a place for everything. So there are times when you have to be sad. There are times when, yeah, you may need to be angry, but the goal is just
Mhm.
not to stay there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's this misconception that by giving acknowledgement to those like yucky feelings, whether it
Yeah.
be anger or disappointment, anxiety, even by giving it attention, we're giving it power, but it's actually quite the opposite. So when we give it attention and we give it a name and we give it space to breathe,
Yeah.
we actually have the power over it. We get the power to script what that means and what we're going to do with it. The
Yeah.
more that we suppress, that we push off giving it the attention that it's demanding, the more power that it actually has over us.
Nice ad.
Absolutely.
quick quick thought on that. When you talk about how we label or even identify what we're feeling, there are some people who feel that there's some people who are just a little too happy, where they're
Mm,
always excited or they're always smiling or always upbeat. So there's this new wave that I'm noticing just from what I'm reading about maybe toxic positivity. So let's
Mm.
talk about that. Let's talk about the other side of how potentially behaviors related to what can be perceived as toxic positivity can impact happiness. How do you feel that that perception is changing how we approach happiness?
yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to what I was just saying. If we're not giving those other emotions space in our lives that they're demanding, and just kind of glazing over it with happiness, or always, you want to look for the silver lining, but you don't want to ignore or dismiss the reality of what's happening. Um, you can find the silver lining within it, but you have to still acknowledge the
Yeah,
reality of those other feelings. And that toxic positivity is just pretending that everything's okay. And that's just not a reality that anybody lives in.
I agree with that, Peyton. When I started this journey towards happiness, and I mentioned earlier that I had to become more self-aware. So I started studying the human truths. And forgive me, I always seem to forget one, but we want to belong. We long to feel
Mm.
special. We dream of reaching our full potential. We want to be understood, and we crave more control over our life. Wow, I did it.
You
I'm so
got
proud of myself.
it.
But at that point in my journey, I had to measure my emotions. So sometimes it does take work towards happiness and to avoid that perception of toxic positivity. So basically, when I experience any given emotion, and I would sit with myself and say, well, why do I feel this way? Is it
Mm,
touching a nerve? Do I feel like I can't control this situation? And is it actually something I can control? So we have a responsibility to examine, you know, how we're feeling and judge in that moment. Okay, is this a valid emotion to have? Is my happiness valid in this moment? Or am I just glossing over a situation because I don't want to face the truth? My happiness, I face my truth. I live in my truth. I said I've learned to set up healthy boundaries, which is a
mm,
part of my happiness, of maintaining my happiness. um, Holding others accountable, that alleviates you from sometimes stress or angst that you're carrying because you may be hesitant to confront any given situation for fear that you would be perceived a different way. So it really, really, that whole concept, it runs deeper than we actually think. And the surface smiles on our faces, um, to with respects to maintaining happiness. I know
Nice.
I
I
said
want
a
to.
lot.
You did, and I
yeah.
want to. I want to go deeper into that and
Yeah.
ask, specifically to you, what are some like of the intentional activities, that people can do to improve their happiness?
Wow. Okay. Well, again, in Neil Pasricha's book, he gave us the big 7 ways. And why I wanted to highlight it in this talk is because I know we discussed earlier, um, some of these activities can really be instinctive to many people, and then some of them are learned. And so, what he talks about is taking 3 walks a day or 3 walks a week for about 30 minutes. And what that does, it can improve. How can you say it? Like your mental health. It's proven to
Hmm.
help improve a state of clinical depression. There's a 20-minute replay. So sometimes, you hear often people recommending journaling. I'm not one that likes to write too much, but journaling a few times a week about positive experiences, it replays those emotions in your mind. And so it's like you're reliving those emotions, which improves your state of mind. Another one is random acts of kindness, just doing something for someone else just because, and that speaks to what we believe in, our mission here at LifeGuides, community above self, and positively impacting the lives of others. So another one is a complete unplug. That's my favorite. I will
Mm.
Oh yeah,
definitely,
I like that.
yeah, when I feel the need, I alert my friends and family and loved ones and say, you know what? I need a few hours. I'm turning off my phone. I'm turning off my social media, and I'm just going to recharge. I'm going to renew because I need to recharge my batteries, and they're all okay with it, you know. So that's a good thing. And like you mentioned, Peyton, meditations. I just
Mm.
wanted to send in this plug. I love Headspace because just like you said, we don't always have 10 minutes in a day to just sit and breathe, or we may not even know where to go to find a class. But you have this app, and they have 1 minute to an hour meditations on different subject matters, and I've always found that very helpful for me.
Definitely. I want to go back to the thing that you said about walking from the book you were reading. So,
Yeah,
walking really gives us access to our full brain, and it's not so, arduous as a cardio activity that we're too preoccupied. It brings us to the present moment because we're constantly looking, okay, where is this next step? What is like, do I have a solid footing here? But it also gives us permission to get into that metacognitive state where you can start looking at what you're thinking about, replaying things that you were
yeah,
maybe experienced before, or maybe replaying thoughts that you had thought earlier in the day and asking yourself, what was all of that about?
yeah,
So walking is a really great one. They actually suggest that doing cardio first thing in the morning is amazing for your health for a myriad of reasons, one of them being that you're resetting your circadian rhythm because having that sun in your eyes helps the release of melatonin later in the evening.
wow.
So walking does so many things for you, and I feel like it's such an easy benchmark for people to get to.
Absolutely.
I like that you mentioned walking. I like to take meetings while walking. Um,
Mm,
Really?
just to break it up, especially for meetings that I know I may not need to take uh, successive notes on, but it's just more of a connection. It's great to take a walk because then, like, as you said, Peyton, you're able to have those metacognitive thoughts, think about thinking, think about what you're doing, and have the freedom to experience nature. I really believe that nature has a healing presence, and sometimes we don't get to connect with it as much as we
Yeah.
want to. So I want to go back to a question. We were talking about emotion. So Peyton, you know, I want you to maybe describe what your thoughts are around happiness as an emotion versus maybe being a state of being.
yeah, so I mean, I think the way that I think about all emotions, which includes happiness, is it's data. And I don't know if that's just me, but it really is information that our mind is giving to us to tune in. So if I'm experiencing sadness, the same thing that Rukio is saying, I give myself space like, okay, wait, why is this emotion coming up? Like, what is this triggering for me? Or maybe take notes on what my environment is cueing that I was totally oblivious to. So if you permit yourself that space and almost curiosity
Yeah.
to whatever reality or whatever knee-jerk reaction that you're having, I think gives you more permission and more presenteeism in your feelings.
Yeah. You know, if I can just jump in, I thought about something a lot of during our coaching sessions as life guides. A common thread is always to encourage people to reflect. And one thing I found for myself personally, um, as I was discovering what happiness meant to me, what was happiness for me in my life, I realized that I hadn't really taken the time to reflect. You know, you have events in your life that make you happy, you know, a marriage, finding love, birth of a child, or getting that job you want, whatever it is. But then really to sit down and really get to know yourself on that level and say, well, these are the things that make me truly happy. You know, going for a walk, like you mentioned, Dr. Dave, going and experiencing nature, you know, just taking those moments and pausing. I remember when I really began to realize how much I had tunnel vision in my life, and had like closed myself away from the things that could make me happy. I started to stop and the statement is a little bit cliche, smell the roses a little bit and really begin to appreciate all the wonder and the beauty that was actually surrounding me all along.
Mm.
Yeah.
To kind of piggyback on that, I love how you're talking about all of these, parts of life that you correlate with happiness. And what's funny to me is there's actually a lot of things in our life that you wouldn't necessarily think are happy, but the way that our body experiences it on a molecular level is happiness, like
Mm.
getting a task finished. So, like,
Yes.
nobody would think that folding laundry would make you happy, but actually being able to check that off your to-do list does give you the same biochemical release as doing something super joyful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's with a myriad of things like that cardio I'm talking about in the morning. Maybe it's like really hard to drag yourself out of bed, but the chemical release that you'll get after doing that cardio is also going to bring you that happiness. And it's fleeting just as it is all of your other emotions,
Yes.
but you can also say like, oh well, I'm going to experience happiness at the same time I'm going to experience this apprehension towards wanting to do it.
Right. And that's true. And that's all a part of being intentional about it, just
Mhm.
being aware of the two emotions working in tandem. I may feel anxiety, but I'm going to have that feeling of happiness afterwards. And it's funny you brought it up about walking, because I was speaking with one of our colleagues earlier this month, and it was just about feeling healthy. And he recommended to me to go for walks, and I was dreading it because I love hopping in my car and driving wherever I need to go. And then when I started walking, it was amazing. I just felt so good. I felt reinvigorated. And then I just started walking everywhere.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, going to get groceries, like if you have the ability to walk to a grocery store, I just feel like you feel so much more accomplished. You carry those groceries all the way back.
Yep.
It
Yep.
yeah, it's a twofer.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like I did that. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
I want to jump in and add just a personal experience. I have a teenager, which some people who are on the line may have teenagers as well. uh, Getting them to do anything that you want as an adult is typically a challenge, and typically they don't want to do it. So you're talking about walking. I use the example of going on a hike. My son is like, no, I'd rather play video games. I have an Oculus. There's air condition. Why do I need to go outside? It's hot out there. But then after we go out, there's this relief that comes from him. He's like, man, I feel better. I feel, as you said, Peyton, more accomplished, and I feel overall happier. So it's kind of this thing of feeling the fear and doing it anyway, you know,
Mhm.
feeling that resistance and
Yeah.
then going towards it anyway. So I wanted to ask about uh, how to build happiness. You know, some people build happiness around them by making sure that they only have things that they like, nothing that will make them mad or angry.
Mhm.
Do you have any techniques for building happiness, or do you believe that that's even an appropriate path?
Wow. What a question.
Bombs.
I'm telling you. Peyton, you
My
want to take the lead?
My suggestion is kind of straightforward. It's practice. It's just
Mhm.
like anything else that you want to establish in your life. It takes consistent effort. And maybe, throughout time you start building up, and then before you know it, your knee jerk reaction will be happiness, will be find that silver lining. But it just takes time and effort, truly. Um,
Yeah. I
I know that seems like such a simple answer to such a complex question, but that's the truth. It really is just practice and building up those blocks.
Yeah, Peyton, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And at there are some days I feel like I'm still building, and I feel like it's something that just doesn't um, stop. You don't just attain it; it's continual. It's moving.
Mm,
It's our happiness, our sources of happiness. It changes over the course of life, and it's just happiness for me in that structure is being able to be more open. I have my best friend. She told me one day, she says, you're so funny. She says, because you don't like your feathers to be ruffled. And she says, but that's not life. In life, your feathers are going to be ruffled. And so for me, part of my happiness is recognizing, you know what? Yeah, my feathers were ruffled, but it was ruffled for a purpose, and I managed it well and managed it for the greater good. That's how I
Mm.
think about it. Not so much controlling every little aspect. Like if this isn't something that's going to make me happy, keep it far away from me. So yeah.
And what you just touched on there is, taking the power of that narrative. Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I did go through that. My feathers got ruffled, as you said.
Yeah.
But I did it with a purpose and something came from it. And I
Yeah.
think that's the power of storytelling. That's the
Yeah.
power of reflection and being able to write the script. Because we have, I think research says now it's like 16,000 thoughts a
Yeah.
day. So we get to cherry pick which ones are true for us, because the way
Exactly.
that thoughts work is really almost like Google auto generated results. So if you
Mhm.
start typing in a word, your brain's giving you a couple of different options, but
Yeah.
you, as like the being that has these thoughts, gets to select which one you want to ring true, or which one you want to run through the search engine.
Yeah.
So storytelling gives you that power, and
Right.
you get to select the way that you narrate that experience.
Facts. Yeah.
Big facts.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned you're talking about thoughts. So when you talk about thoughts, you also have to include the other side of thoughts, which can be those anxious thoughts or those, those
Interesting.
blocks to those intrusive thoughts that are blocking you from getting to happiness.
Mhm.
So how would you recommend someone, or if you have any ideas on how to recommend someone to overcome those? And I'll start. I'll kind of give a quick one. Um, I love presenting this. I learned this from Dr. Jeffrey Martin at the Transformative Technology Lab. Whenever those intrusive thoughts are coming in, and they happen, you can't, stop them. They're going to happen, but your choice to attach to them is a
Yes.
choice. And
Hmm.
so what he has kind of taught is this process of saying cancel, cancel. I've mentioned this before in previous sessions where you have that intrusive thought, that anxious feeling like, oh man, I'm not good enough. And as soon as that story starts, that thought starts, rather than attaching to it and letting it grow, just saying cancel, cancel. No, that's not true for the story that I'm building. So do you have any other thoughts or ideas on how you can um, prevent those intrusive thoughts from stopping us from reaching happiness?
I'd love to jump in because this is like my bread and butter right now.
Okay.
This
Go
we're
for
talking
it.
about the nervous system. So when you're having those intrusive thoughts, or when you're in a state of paralysis, when you feel like you can't go to, that higher brain functioning, you need to get into your body. You need to do those breathing exercises.
Mm.
I love this cancel idea, but there's some people who perhaps get into a state of paralysis that doesn't permit them to even get to the point of feeling like they have power to cancel those thoughts.
Yeah.
So the best way to do it is hijack that nervous system, tune into your breath, bring down your heart rate, and get back into that higher cortical functioning. And then from that point, you I I think because I'm a meditative person, or have that, pretty well established in my lifestyle, I just observe those thoughts with curiosity and watch them float by like clouds. And then in a space where I feel more reflective, I can go back to like, oh wow, that really came up for me. What were the things that were cueing those thoughts for me? And then establishing a new narrative.
I feel like I'm the perfect pairing of both of your points, because I agree with the cancel, and I also agree with breathing. Um, my catchphrase is usually manage your self-talk. Negative self-talk will hold you back. So when those thoughts come in, parry it with I can. Um, Also, Dr. Dave, you were saying how you have a teenager. I have young adults. And one of my young adults, they're probably going to kill me for mentioning them, but I'm going to say it. One of my young adults is prone to needing breathing exercises, because the minute something doesn't sound right, you can just feel the blood pressure rising and
Mm.
the hyperventilation. And I would tell my child, let's breathe. Take it, like you said, Peyton, 3 breaths. Come on, in the nose, out the mouth. let's bring it down. And then whereas the other child I have is more pensive. So with that one, it's okay, we're going to manage the self-talk. What can you do today? What actions have you taken? And let's celebrate those accomplishments that you've made, no matter how small or menial you may think they are. You need to take time to stop, reflect, celebrate. And that is one of the ways that I counter negative self-talk.
Love to
Another
hear
really
it.
great
Go ahead,
strategy.
Peyton.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Another really great strategy too is questioning that
Yeah.
inner narrative or dialogue that's saying you can't, or who do you think you are, and say, says who? Who,
Yeah.
who is this bringing this forward to me?
Absolutely.
Or why? Why? Challenge
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great way to get to the bottom of it too.
I like that.
Wow.
Great point.
Yeah. Great point. Although I want to throw in a alternative view here. So we talk about sometimes attachment and happiness. The happiness can be broken if there's an attachment to something and it leaves.
Mhm.
So how can someone release attachment? Not only to the things that they love and that make them happy, but also, just release attachment as a whole, as we know that this is what we do. We get attached to things. We love our kids. We love our job. We love our dog, and all of these things are fleeting. They are not infinite. They are going to pass. How do we deal with that and still remain happy?
The human propensity for suffering. I mean, we really set ourselves up for that with attachment.
Yeah, we did.
I think honestly, the way that I combat that in my personal life is recognizing the impermanence of everything, which just gives you so much gratitude for the present moment. Like, oh, I love spending time with this person. It doesn't mean that I need to spend the rest of my time with this person and the rest of the time being like the rest of my life. It just means like right now, this is so great, or your dog, or whatever activity it is. And it gives you permission to be fully present right then, right there with whomever or whatever it is. And in acknowledging impermanence, it makes it that much sweeter. Recognizing like, oh, this is right now. It's not going to be like this even next time with the same person in the same environment. It's going to be different. It might be just as sweet, but it's not like this.
The thought that came to my mind, and it may be a little bit funny, but I'm like, I Mary Kundu the thought, I honor it, before I release it, so whatever that experience, whatever that connection, that relationship is, if it's something that is fleeting or will eventually go away, and I am a dog lover, and so I have lost some dogs, but I honor the fact that I'm just going to use my dogs, that the dogs were in my life, and I honor and I cherish those memories. And that's how I'm able to let it go, that, okay, my dog is gone. I have to move on. I have to carry on, but there'll be other experiences. So it's almost like a mourning process, but you just honor it and keep going.
Wow. I
Mourning
love
and
those
gratitude
ideas. Mourning and gratitude. I love the idea
together.
of putting those together, and also because it shows that kind of duality a little bit of how we have to be present, but we know that it's not forever. So I love that you were adding that, Peyton, about the importance of this is this moment right now, and it won't be the same moment later. It won't be the same moment tomorrow.
Right.
I think another great thing that I found in research, I believe his name is Bob Waldinger. He is doing an adult developmental study, and it goes across the entire lifespan. And what they're trying to find is like, what are the components to happiness? And they have a really diverse population. I think the case study was like over 100 people, and they've studied them over 100 years now. I think it started in like 1938. John F. Kennedy was actually one of the people in the study, which is kind of cool. And now they're moving into generation, like the following generation, as this first generation has passed. And one of the things that they concluded from this first generation, the things that curated happiness for them was not the material things, was not like the things that we spend a lot of our time like hustling to get to that we think is going to curate happiness. But the biggest predictor was like the strong social relationships that they had. And like the little moments of like teaching a young one how to write their name, teaching a young one how to do something that you find passionate and carrying on that almost legacy for you. It's those attachments in those moments that actually curate the happiness for you.
I like I like what I'm hearing there, especially because what it points to is how we are connected. And when you are supporting someone else or helping someone else learn, that we can derive happiness or even in some senses pleasure for someone else to succeed. That's what I
Mhm.
think coaches feel, not just coaches in the working field or executive coaches, but even sports coaches. They love to
Mhm.
see their players, the people that they're supporting, do well and teaching them new skills. Same thing with kids too. I mean, there's nothing like getting a kid to tie their shoes for the first time because you don't have to do it anymore. You're like, great, you you know how to do it. I'm good. I don't have to to do that anymore. So it's a great opportunity for that. I do want to ask a quick question, something that's been on my mind this whole conversation. And I want to ask it to the community. I saw that we just have had a chat posted by one of our hosts about any comments and questions. We do want to open for that in a few moments. But I want to ask, what's one thing that you find just complete happiness in? Like that when you see it, you're like, this is what happiness means to me. And if you want, I can share first if you want to, give yourself a little bit of a moment to think about it. So for me, it was research that was done on unprovoked happiness. I encourage everyone to search for that. There's a couple videos out there on YouTube on unprovoked happiness. And this was a individual who basically she would blow bubbles. And so whenever I see bubbles, whenever I see a kid, or I have a bubble machine in the back of my house, and because I'm a big kid and I like to just see them floating around. And when I see bubbles, it's instant happiness for me because the soap bubble is just floating around. There's no aim. It's just going. Things are unfolding. It's not making anything happen. It's just there and it's experiencing. So yeah, so that's the thing that I find the most happiness in, no matter when or where I see it.
That's so pure. Like, I feel like I need to go get some bubbles for after this chat now
Yeah.
and just have that unprovoked happiness. If I have to, I think, happiness comes to me in a lot of different ways. And a lot of the times it comes in these really unexpected, mundane sharing of experience with another person. Actually, just this past weekend, I was connecting with a girlfriend who I hadn't seen in like 2 years. She lives in Phoenix. I'm over here on the East Coast in Boston. And, we went up to Acadia National Park in Maine. We did a sunset cruise. We went out to a really nice dinner. And then at the end of the night, we played phase 10. And you would think like sunset cruise, that would be, top of the charts. That would be where you have the most happiness. But truly, the most happiness that I experienced was sitting at this little table in her cabin playing phase 10 in our pajamas. Like it was unmatched.
Wow. Well, for me, it may seem a little bit trivial to others, but for me, there is an attachment to my grandmother. So growing up, our quality time together was shared at Macy's department store. And there was a certain sound that the cash registers would make. And it's like boop, 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 at that time growing up. And I tell you, whenever I enter a department store and I hear that sound, it's just instant happiness. It takes me back to when I was a kid waiting for my grandmother at the store. So, and I found it so funny that I felt that way, but I really felt almost euphoric just hearing that little sound of the cash register. So, yeah.
Oh, that is so wholesome. I think there's so many different senses. Our
Yeah.
olfactory nerve is actually most closely related to our amygdala, our memory center. So oftentimes sense will be what people
Yeah.
recount for bringing up a memory for them, but sound is right next to it,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love that we're bringing these two different sides of experiential as well as the science behind the brain. Because Peyton, you are correct. The olfactory senses. There's nothing like smelling your mother's or grandmother's dish that they are,
Mm,
known for making, and when you smell it, you're instantly taken back to that place. And typically, I mean, of course, everyone had a different upbringing as a child, so I don't want to be dismissive, but typically there are some happy experiences even when there are challenging ones, and that those smells can take you back. And that's why I think, grandma's apple pie or sweet potato pie is one of the best things at events, because you smell it, you remember, and then you get to either relive or kind of reframe happiness, so to speak.
Mm.
true. Very true.
All right. Well, we are moving towards the end here. I do want to open up the chat. If there are any questions that you have, please place them in the chat. We'd love to answer them. I do see one from Sally, so I'll go ahead and read it. Do you ever find yourself having to temper your happiness or suppress your joy in the presence of other coworkers? This is a great question, Sally. I find that very draining when the vibe around me is heavy. Love this question. I I'll start, and I want to give both of you an option to answer as well. When we talk about work and how we show up, the way that we present to others sometimes can be triggering. I've been told that because at times I may present stoic and unaffected, that I am flat or unemotional. And even though Spock is my favorite character from Star Trek, it is who I am. So it is a challenge at times to show up and have to alter your presentation for the room, because there are times where I do need to read the room, and people do need to see me emote more than normal so that they can feel connected. Now, I agree with you, Sally. That can be draining to understand and feel a vibe and then adjust yourself accordingly. So I would always err on the side of finding whatever is balanced within you, knowing that, for me, speaking from my perspective, I know that being overly happy or overly excited is just really not who I am. And if I do that, I'm not being true to myself, and then I can't really be there to support someone within the co-working environment. So that's kind of my take on it. What are your thoughts, Peyton or Rakia?
I think that emotions permeate. So if you're picking up on this bad vibe in your work environment, but you're feeling happiness, if you're not giving yourself the permission slip to express that happiness and whatever feels authentic to you, then you're absorbing that bad energy yourself. Sure, maybe read the room like Dr. Dave says, where you need to maybe not be super jubilant and out there, but I don't think that you need to necessarily completely buffer your happiness in order to match the negativity that you're feeling in your office.
I agree with that, Peyton. I believe, it's always a good thing to present your authentic self in any situation, but as appropriate for the environment that you're in. So not so much tempering down your happiness or your vibrant personality. If you're vibrant, it will show through. A little bit like Dr. Dave, I have a very serious regard. I'm often told I look angry, or people will think something is wrong. And I'm just thinking, I'm very happy on the inside, but for some reason it doesn't translate on the outside. So, I've learned to be myself, to your own self, be true, you know,
Mhm.
and as long as you are being authentic and you're there for the right purpose and you're communicating effectively with others, the fact that you're vibrant and others may be more monotone, they may appreciate your energy. You never know, so you have to just stay true to who you are. That would be my advice.
Maybe there's a way that you could have a practice to exercise that happiness that maybe isn't so outward that everybody sees it and maybe is turned off by it. Maybe it's like writing yourself sticky notes. Maybe it's writing some cards. I'm trying to think of like more quiet things that you could do at your desk. But nonetheless, I really don't think that you should temper your happiness to match the vibe of the office, because I think just like their bad vibes permeate, your happiness will also permeate.
Mhm. I want to add here, this is something that I tell my daughter all the time. You know, she is a preteen, and anyone, again, with teenagers understands that there's a interlay between social media, Web3, you know, the metaverse, and how people see themselves. And so this is, of course, making challenges for young women specifically on body image and how they feel, and, you know, associations with depressions and symptoms related to that. And so I tell my daughter all the time that you are not responsible for somebody else's happiness. You're only responsible for yours. And at times, the way that you present, and to Sally's point, sometimes can make you feel like you need to make someone else happy, or you need to up yourself or down yourself to meet someone where they are. But you have to keep in mind, and this is what I tell her, is that you really can't do that. Happiness is an inherent thing that is completely different for everyone. The only thing that you can do is be happy within yourself, and not necessarily be swayed so easily by society, or, you know, social media, whatever you're connecting with.
The
Okay, so we
power
are.
is in you, and that's where it begins, and that's exactly where it ends too.
Yeah,
That's a nice ad. Nice ad.
that's beautiful. Yeah.
It is. I'm going to tell her that. Like, as soon as I get off, I'm going to go and tell her that. I promise, because we need to give more power to people to control their own happiness. And
Yeah.
we, just as I was about to reach to the end here, was there anything else that either of you would like to share with the community before we move to close and do our normal gratitude celebration?
Okay, so there was one thing that came to me, and I can't believe that I didn't touch on it before this point, but one of, the biggest things that contribute to happiness is also adequate sleep. If we are not resting and recharging in an appropriate way, we're not giving ourselves even a half chance at getting to the place that we need to be to start showing up for ourselves, to go for that morning walk, to practice that 1 minute meditation. We need to get, anywhere between 7 and 9 hours, whatever feels right for your body, every single night. You really have to prioritize that. I think that's like the prerequisite to all of these other building blocks for happiness.
Thank you for saying that, Peyton, because that is so true. If I were to just give one last reference, and it speaks to well-being and the benefits of sleep, it would be for our listeners there to read Arianna Huffington's Thrive, the third metric of redefining success and creating a life of well-being, wisdom, and wonder. In there, I read that book after I had had a mild burnout, and due to the fact that I just wasn't sleeping. And she has a chapter in there on the benefits of sleep, and it was very, very helpful to me. And if you are interested in improving your quality of sleep and learning more about that topic, I would highly recommend that book.
Talk about synchronicities. I was reading, this is a book I was just recently provided by Pete Lieberman. And in this book, I was just reading today about that chapter and how she was working upwards of 100 hours a week,
There you
Arianna
go.
Huffington, and, you know, passed out, hit her head.
Yes.
And it it's real. Like sleep,
Yeah.
there's an ecosystem to us being optimal. It's eating well, working out, and maybe it's not working out, maybe it's moving your body. It's having a community, being able to connect with other people. We are social beings. It's making sure that you're eating the right things that are life affirming foods. And it's also making sure that you curate the things that are pulling away from your happiness. Like Karen posted in the chat, cutting away from watching the news sometimes. You talked about that too, Ricky. You're like, just, hey, I'm disconnecting, people. Don't text
Yes.
me, you know, or if you do text me, you'll get it back, you know,
Yeah.
later on, not right now. So
Exactly.
I love to see that. And as we normally do to close, I'd like everyone, if there's something that you're super grateful for, or that you find even to be extremely happiness inducing, please pop that in the chat. I will share that I am grateful for the two of you. I've learned a lot, and I truly mean that. I've learned a lot in this short time together, and I've got some reading to do, and I've got some learning to do, and some change to do. So I'm grateful for both of you. Thank you for being here today.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be a part of another one of these chats. They fill my cup for the rest of the week at least.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. This was my first chat, and I thank you both for the confidence that you placed in me to be a part of this panel and for the opportunity to speak to some of our members. Very grateful. Thank you.
Much appreciation. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending today, and for the people who are viewing on recording. Thank you wherever you are, wherever time this may be for you. Just continue to see happiness as an opportunity. And I like what we've talked about today, that happiness can be a choice. Remember that you have autonomy. You have control over the story, the narrative that you're telling yourself. I think it was Brene Brown who has kind of pushed this. The story I'm telling myself is X. And if it's a story, just know it can be edited. And if it can be edited, you can create whatever you want. Never let anything stop you, even though there's a lot of things out there designed to stop you. So again, appreciation to everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Some of the resources that were covered here will be sent to you with the recording. And if you have any questions, or if you'd like to know how you can be connected with a guide to help you develop some of these skills with happiness, please contact our Wellbeing Concierge. All right, everyone. You have a great week. Peace be with you.